So what I wanted to do tonight was not to give a lecture, because I know in Denmark everybody's very in the habit of going to see lectures. So what I prefer to do, which is what I've done the last few trips here, I'm going to speak a little bit about inquiry, and then I'm going to take questions from you. And what I'll do is maybe I'll take about 10 questions, and then I'll go through them. So what I would like to do is really respond to what you would like to know, rather than talk at you. Because I think that way it'll be a much more satisfying evening for all of us. Okay? So, in the practice of inquiry, an inquirer is someone who's always more interested in what they don't know than what they already know. So if you want to be able to practice the art of philosophical inquiry and spiritual inquiry, the attitude or the approach has to be one where we're very much more interested in what we do not already know, and what we do not already think, and what we do not already understand, than what we do already think, do already know, and do already understand. So there's kind of an attitude of openness, receptivity, and interest. And the idea is we want to cultivate an attitude of curiosity about reality. And the curiosity about reality, when we start to become a seeker for enlightenment, is usually related to something like 3 fundamental questions. The first question would be, who am I? You all heard of that question? Who am I? Have any of you thought about it? So that would be one of the first ones. The second one would be, why am I here in this world? Which I think is a very important question to ask. Why am I here in this world? And the third one, have you ever thought about why you're here? Good. That's an important question. A lot of people don't even think about that question. They just assume they already know. And the third question is, why does the universe exist? So those are the 3 questions that I think are the most important ones to become an enlightened person. The first one is, who am I? The second one is, why am I here? And the third one is, why does the universe exist? So, in order to be able to find the answers to those questions, those fundamental questions and those very important questions, we have to cultivate an attitude of deep and profound interest in what we don't already know and what we don't already understand. Now, once you find out the answers to the question, who am I, why am I here, and why does the universe exist, there's so many more things to know. Because even if you figure out the most important questions, there's still going to be hundreds of thousands of more questions if we want to understand reality. And it actually never ends. There's no end to learning more about what it means to be alive, right? Now, I've found that a lot of people don't think very deeply about life, unfortunately. So they don't really struggle with big questions or complex questions or subtle questions. They just kind of go along with what their parents told them, their teachers told them, and what their culture has told them and what their culture tells them. And they don't really question too deeply whether what their parents told them was actually true, or how true was it. And they don't question whether what their teachers told them was true or how true was it. And they don't necessarily question what their culture told them and tells them is true and how true it is. So for too many people, they don't really think too deeply, they don't question that much, and they're kind of lazy in their attitude. And it's easier not to ask questions and to be curious and to want to know. It's easier not to ask questions than it is to ask questions. Because once you start asking one question and you find the answer, then that leads to another question, which leads to another question, which leads to another answer, which leads to another question, and then it's kind of a non-stop process. But once you start questioning things that you've been told by your parents, by your teachers, and by your culture, it's like you're pulling apart a structure. And if you keep pulling it, and then the structure falls away, then you have to find out what's real for yourself. And so the point here is that it's the attitude of inquiry, of being interested in what's real and being interested in what's true, is kind of it's a perpetual process. Once you actually learn how to do it and begin to start to practice yourself the art and science of philosophical and spiritual inquiry. And so at the beginning, it seems like it's something you need to do to answer life's fundamental metaphysical and philosophical questions. But wrong door. Oops, it's okay. So at the beginning, it seems like something you have to do to answer life's most fundamental and profound philosophical and metaphysical questions. But eventually, if you get into it, you find out that it's an attitude you actually have to keep practicing all the time, because our capacity for learning and understanding life is endless. And so the question is, once you start thinking for yourself, once you start thinking deeply for yourself, you learn how to keep thinking deeply for yourself. And so one of the ways another way to put this is that, to follow on from what I was just saying, to put it in a slightly different way to make the same point, unless we learn how to think for ourselves, which not enough people do, but unless we learn how to think for ourselves, we're going to be living someone else's life. We're going to be living according to someone else's ideas, someone else's thoughts, someone else's ideas, someone else's beliefs, someone else's convictions. So to learn how to think for ourselves, which means to become a truly independent human being, requires an enormous degree of self-discipline and commitment to wanting to know what's true and what's real. And it's much easier not to do that. But if we don't learn how to make the enormous effort, philosophical effort, spiritual effort, heroic effort, to think deeply and clearly for ourselves about the nature of the real, as I just said, inevitably we're going to be living our own life in our own body and our own mind according to someone else's ideas, beliefs, and conclusions. So our parents came to whatever conclusions they did because they did. But maybe they didn't know maybe they didn't think very deeply, or maybe they were great philosophers. I don't really know. But even great philosophers can be wrong. Right? And so everybody's doing the best they can, and then our teachers were doing as well as they could, and they told us what they thought and they earnestly believed was true. But how far did any of them go on an individual level? How deeply did they dig into the mysteries of life? And how important was it for them to understand what it actually means to exist? And then, of course, there's the issue of our culture. How enlightened is our culture, is the culture from which we've come? And what are the limitations of the values and perspectives and attitudes and beliefs of our own shared culture, and shared context, shared background. So the simple point I'm trying to make is it's a very big thing, it's a very big deal to learn how to think for yourself, to become an inquirer, to learn how to think deeply for yourself. And it's a very big deal to become your own person. So I don't really believe anybody becomes truly independent, an authentically independent individual, unless they've gotten to that point in their own development where they are really thinking independently for themselves about life. And you'll be able to tell if someone's thinking independently because they will be able to explain to you what their philosophy of life is, what their fundamental moral, philosophical, and metaphysical principles are. They'll be able to explain to you very clearly how they reached those conclusions and why those conclusions are valid and why they make sense versus others. So someone who thinks for themselves will be kind of like a philosopher. They know what they think and they know why they think. They'll know what they think and they'll know why they think, what they think, about what they think, if that makes sense. But it takes enormous self-discipline and kind of a rigorous kind of intensity of interest in life and in reality and in consciousness and in the mind and in culture and in thought and in the universe. You have to become a very curious person. And that's what it takes. So that's what we're kind of going to do tonight. Does that sound good? Very good. So, what I would like to do is I'd like you to start with at least 10 questions. Would you like a little time to think about them? Now, in terms of the questions that I'd like from you, it's important that the questions are serious questions for you. So please don't ask me a question that is an abstract question that doesn't really mean anything and is not really very important, because anybody can do that. But what I can help you with are questions that are actually very important to you right now. And I would ask that the questions be the questions I'm interested in would be philosophical questions, assuming you're struggling with philosophical questions, right? Or moral questions, or spiritual questions. Now, I'm not so good with the personal questions, the personal ones. If you want to ask me one, I'll take it, but that's not what I'm really the best at. Because what I try and do with this teaching is I've come up with a teaching that will help you answer your own questions, because the teaching creates a moral, philosophical, and spiritual context for life and for reality that will help you come to your own answers. So I'm not a psychologist. So I'm not so good on the personal questions. So I prefer you don't ask me those kind of questions, but if you want to, you can do it anyway. And I'll try. But the questions I'm really good at are the moral, philosophical, and spiritual or metaphysical questions. Okay? And then as I go through the questions, one by one, slowly, I'll create kind of a picture, a tapestry of the teaching of evolutionary enlightenment will slowly, as I ask one question after another, emerge as a tapestry or as a perspective, as a philosophical and spiritual orientation that will slowly come together. And by the time we come to the end of the evening, I think you'll get some sense of what that's all about. Okay? That's kind of the idea. So do you need a couple of minutes to think, or are you ready to go? You ready? No? Are you ready? Because otherwise we can sit for a minute or two in silence. You want to do that? We can sit for a few minutes. Maybe 3 minutes we can sit in silence. And then I'll take the questions and then we'll begin. All righty?
When they are giving a message and helping unemployed people. And I have seen a special scenario a few weeks ago. A friend I know, she has been to a therapist, and she was a healer, and she was getting some advices. And there was a very big change happening to her afterwards. It was like there was something else happening to her. She got some advices, but there was a big change happening to her. So sometimes when you interact with people, something bigger happens.
What's the question?
What that is. No?
I don't know how to answer that because I have no idea what happened, but something good happened, that's for sure.
Yeah? Okay.
All right?
Yes.
Okay, hi.
Hello. I recently had an experience with past lives because I've never been a believer of reincarnation, but I wanted to inquire it, so try it out if there was something about it. So I went into a hypnosis, and I had some experiences where I saw my past lives, but I can feel myself, I don't really trust it. So I guess my question is, how can you trust a spiritual experience if you cannot really find the right philosophical arguments for the for that event?
All right, thank you, that's good.
Thank you.
Who else? Anybody else over here? Everybody? This is a very big moment. I'm saying I can answer the most important questions you have, which is a very unusual, very bold thing to say. So you should see, if this guy, can he really answer the most important questions I have? Could it be true? Let's find out. So is there nobody else over in that group? You sure? Do you mean you don't have any big questions? Oh my God, is it true? Okay. Very good. Hello, yes?
Hi, I'm Hannah Thompson.
Hi.
I grew up in Denmark, but I now live in Utah. And I grew up in a certain religion for many, many years until I had a profound experience that made me leave that religion. Ever since then, I've been really searching, I've been contemplating everything I read, everybody I meet, I have this very pressing question because I want to know the interaction between our reality and the other reality. God's presence in our lives, so to speak. You can talk about it, but you can't really necessarily take it and see it. You can't see God. You can't prove God is there or not. I've read some of your magazines, I've read some of your books, and it seems like the evolutionary process that you talk about is very much here and now, in this world, in this presence, in this what we're experiencing right here and now. So I guess my question to you, since I'm here today, is what is your view on other worlds, spirit guides, God, extraterrestrials?
Okay.
Our interactions with other worlds.
Okay.
Yeah, hello. My name is Lily, and I'm Danish, but I live in the United States and lived there for many years. And see if I can formulate this question. It's a question I've been thinking a lot about recently. And it's about belonging, the sense of belonging. And I lived in many different places in the States, and I never really felt I belonged anywhere. Like, didn't have roots. I was always like missing Denmark, you know, and just want to go back. And then the last place I lived, where I still live, is Richmond, Virginia, and got in touch with the background there. I didn't like the place for 7 years. And I thought it was the South, the Civil War, all of that. And until one day I found out the past of the Richmond was the biggest slave market in the United States, one of the biggest slave market. And I just all of a sudden realized, well, that's why I've been feeling the way I've been feeling. You know, I felt this darkness for so many years. And then after I started learning about the past and reading up on it and walking a slave trail and so on, I start feeling a sense of belonging for the first time. And
What's the question?
the question is, sorry, the question is, what do you have to say about belonging? There is like the sense of belonging you have when you are more the ascending spirituality or descending. I think you talk about that. Having a connection with the roots, with the land, connection with God, with the evolutionary impulse. There's two kind of connections. Do I make sense?
Well, I'm sure you're making sense. I don't know what you're asking me, though.
What is your view about, or your thought about a sense of belonging in the world? Like you.
Okay, very good. I got
Yeah.
it. Thank you. Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Next one. So it's only women asking questions so far. Thank you. There we go. All right.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering about what triggers consciousness, and are there boundaries or are there other connections between intellectual or philosophical development, consciousness expansions, or spiritual enlightenment? Or what are the?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What triggers consciousness? And
What triggers consciousness?
yeah, if you get new concepts, you feel like, wow, I learned a new concept to juggle, and now I see the contrast. Is that consciousness, or is it more like an intellectual development, or what are the boundaries between that and spiritual enlightenment? If you can get that.
You got this. I've never had such difficult questions in my life.
Okay.
Each one of them, I'm doing my best to follow. I don't.
Okay.
Maybe it's
just
probably me.
leave it
but-
at what triggers
But
consciousness.
I'm listening, and these are very long questions that I don't actually know what the question is.
Okay.
Usually, a question is da 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 da. Then I can get it.
What triggers consciousness?
What?
What triggers consciousness?
But I don't know what you said. I don't know what triggering consciousness means.
How do you gain the experience? How would you define that occurred to you?
The triggering of consciousness.
Yes.
But what do you mean by the trigger of consciousness? What does that mean?
If, for example, when you get into the arts, you listen to a beautiful sound of music, beautiful lyrical expression, you feel like that gained your consciousness. So I was wondering what.
I mean, if you have stimulating experiences.
Yeah.
Stimulating experiences.
Yeah.
That's what triggers consciousness.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Let's go.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very fine. You named the three big questions.
Who am I? Why am I here? And why does the universe exist?
Yes, and I would love to hear your views about the last one,
Okay.
which I've also been interested in for many
Oh,
years.
I'd be happy to. Why the universe exists?
Yes, I
Okay.
would love to hear what
Okay.
you have investigated. And
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. Those questions, actually, they are very close to the limit between spirituality or pathology, sickness, mental sickness. As I see those questions, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? Why am I here?
Yeah.
What about the universe? Those things. Why is the universe wherever it comes from? Those three questions, they are pretty close to the psychopathology, the mental diseases. So,
Why?
well, because people with, for instance, schizophrenia, they don't know why they are here. They don't know what they are. So, if you take what I would like to ask you about is when you give in to that spirituality, how can you be sure where the limit between mental, losing it, going into some crazy mental state where you can't reach reality, and between giving in to the void, to the emptiness, letting go totally of the ego, but at the same time maintaining the mental health. Was that clear? Giving into that void and that emptiness, where you let go of everything, time, space, those things.
Sure, I understand.
And still remaining in touch with another kind of reality.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was a... Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, what can I do to become the authentic self or the evolutionary impulse?
Okay.
And what can I do to so it becomes the primary thing in my life?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a man right in the... Oh, it's okay. You can go.
Okay. My name is Nicole.
See, this group has a lot of questions.
Yes.
This group doesn't.
Could you explain to us the spiritual evolution of a human being? How many stages and the stages? Could you describe that?
The stages of development?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little. I know a little bit about it. I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on integral philosophy, which talks about stages, but I know a little bit about it, so I can tell you more than what I know.
Okay. Thank you.
I have.
You did an excellent. Yes. Sorry.
I have a question. I've just read your book. I'm new in all this enlightenment.
Oh, thank you for reading my book. Did you enjoy it?
Yes, and I have a question to the book. It's about the one. It's very difficult when you are coming to the place where you are lucky and all the daily. When you are lucky and all the daily noise is away and you find yourself. You're talking about it's a common self, and you're talking about or writing about the one you find someplace in there. Couldn't you tell more about that or explain that? What you mean by the one? Or
Okay.
do you understand it?
I think I do. When I come back to the question, if I don't, I'll ask you again. Yes, hello. No.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Nils. I have watched a video with you on YouTube called Being and Becoming,
Yeah.
where you compare the old kind, if you could say it that way, of enlightenment, the pre-modern enlightenment that, for instance, Punja is a representative for, and then that was the being part, and then the becoming part that I understand evolutionary work is a part of. Now, my question is, I have read some work of Carl Gustav Jung, where he says that you have to go through your shadow material to be able to be enlightened. Do you see that to reach the becoming part that you talk about, that you have to go through shadow material? That you have to work through the darker sides of the ego, the things you were not allowed to face because your parents said you couldn't?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. It's about ego transcendence also. I'd just like to know a little bit more about the mechanics of it. It's like, what the process is to learn to play an instrument. That you start, you practice, and then you get better and better, and you can take more and more advanced pieces of music. But ego transcendence, when you're doing it, I don't have a clue where I am. Have I transcended 10%, 20%? It's like, can you explain a little bit how the process is, how it feels when you're in it, and what happens at the other side?
I'll try. Thank you very much for that. Hello. Well, now we have too many questions.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Hello. I have some familiarity with your teachings, and actually with Martin I've been working on the translation of your marvelous book. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much too. My question is one I've been grappling with for some years, because I would very much like to see the kind of cultural shift that you've been talking about for many years happen in Denmark. And then I've used a lot of time looking into Danish history. What would it look like when such a shift happens in a culture like ours? And what I seem to notice from earlier leaps on earlier evolutionary stages is that there has been some kind of a happy marriage between a strong spiritual movement and movements, very creative movements in other domains like arts and politics and so on. And I would like to hear your view on that. Is that how it happens?
Is that how what happens?
Is that how a leap happens? That different domains? Because if I may give a little context, what I very often meet with people is that I meet a longing for deeper communion and for creativity to happen on a cultural level in society, but that people kind of back off because they have no spirituality. And could you make any bridges between people who are creative on other levels to make a cultural shift happen? Does it make sense?
Can you say the last part one more time?
I have a lot of friends who are into politics, for example. I have a lot of friends who are into arts, and then I have friends who are into spirituality. And it's like three different islands.
Oh, I know, to get them to come together, you need the spirituality.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah, okay, that's a simple one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm getting to the point, I don't know if I'm able to get to all of them now, but anyway, I'll take these two, I'll take them all, I'll do my best. All I can do is do my best. Yes? Right in the back, right behind, right? Okay, both? Yeah. Okay, it's all right.
Well, it's a kind of more practical problem. What do I do when I am aware that I'm living here in one of the most privileged parts of the world, knowing that there are a lot of people, actually the majority, not so well off as I am. What can I do as a common individual here in the country when I'm not able to go to medical school, help poor people, or study engineering or anything? What can I do as a simple teacher here in Denmark, and how can I cope with the moral problem that I feel that I'm so much privileged compared to other people in the world?
Okay, that's very good. Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's a follow-up actually, because I wanted to talk about morality in the context of evolutionary enlightenment. I mean, a lot of us have been brought up in Christian culture, and there were some guidelines to what morality has meant. And but this is another perspective, the evolutionary perspective, and related to the big questions: who am I, and why am I here? Also is the question: how should I live my life? And what kind of morality? What can you talk about? What is the moral way of action in the context of evolutionary enlightenment?
Okay, so Jan, so those last two questions I'll answer at the same time. Anybody over here?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Trying to be brief. I would like to have your view on a tension I feel nearly daily, and that is how do you try to become an independent, autonomous person, and yet at the same time remain intimately connected with the rest of the world, the rest of people here on the planet?
No, that's a good question. Thank you. Anybody else here?
Yeah, this is not my own personal most important question, but I'm very grateful to have to know your teachings, and also what is called the 5 tenets. And one of the tenets is face everything and avoid nothing. And I would like to just attach to the question by Henrik about our culture and how we can eventually make the next leap in culture, and just ask you what do you see in our culture?
Okay.
When you face everything
Okay.
and about nothing.
Okay. So I think maybe we'll stop there, because otherwise, how many is that?
60.
Right.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
I just didn't have time.
Sure, why not? I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of them, but anyway, go ahead.
That's great. It's also a very practical question, because I have a partner who's also living the teachings, and I've been thinking about it for a while, because it's like we want to support each other's development, but sometimes it seems like that we can also push each other too hard, so it's kind of not, or it's getting rigid, or it's more like it's becoming the ego project to check on each other, and that's not what we want to do. We want to support each other's development. So how can you do that in a
Compassionate way.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, what was the first one?
The first one was, I'm not sure the very first question about...
No, not the very first one. I couldn't understand that. The second one?
About the past lives.
Yes. So yes, your question. So your question was, how do you know what's real?
How can I trust a spiritual experience?
So the question is, how can I trust a spiritual experience? Well, the thing about a spiritual experience, if it's a real spiritual experience, is it leaves you without any doubt. So, my first spiritual experience was when I was 16 years old. And I don't know why it happened. There was no particular reason why it happened, but it was a very powerful experience of a different state of consciousness and a completely different reality than what I'd been used to. But it made such an impression on me, because I knew that what I experienced in those few moments was more real than anything that I'd ever experienced in my 16 years. And the only thing I didn't have any doubt about was that what I had experienced in those few moments was more real than anything I'd ever known. So a spiritual experience is convincing, because one of its qualities is it's more real than anything else that we've ever experienced. There's a deeper sense of authenticity to that kind of depth of awareness. And we know that. That's one of the signs. This is more real than anything else I've ever known. I have no doubt that this is more real than anything I've ever known. And that's what changes everything, because you realize because that shifts our perspective. So one of the signs of a very powerful spiritual episode is the quality of realness. It's more real than anything else. It's more real than anything else. It's more real.
Can I ask feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I had the feeling that it wasn't a spiritual experience, because...
Well, you had a past life regression kind of thing.
Yeah, but those regressions felt like me. It didn't feel like God or anything. So, or is it something inside of me that's reluctant to the idea?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've never had a past life memory, so I don't know. But the spiritual experience is the discovery of the non-relative or absolute dimension of reality. They say in Buddhism, they say there's two truths. There's two levels. One is an absolute level, and one's a relative level. So when you have a spiritual experience, there's a shift of awareness from the relative to the absolute. And that is a different state of consciousness. It's a different kind of seeing, and it's a different kind of knowing. So the past life falls into the relative category. Because what is relative is that which is born, comes into existence, and fades out again. That which is absolute is unborn, uncreated, and undying, is infinite. The absolute is infinite, beginningless and endless, timeless, formless. It's eternal. The relative is what comes into existence and then fades out of existence. So a spiritual, if it's a really powerful spiritual episode, it's an experience of the non-relative or absolute dimension of reality.
So maybe it wasn't a spiritual experience. Is that what you're saying?
Not in the sense that I'm talking about, no. And in the kind of past life regression, it's hard to know whether what you're seeing is actual past lives or something that the mind's creating. And it's hard to know. It could be one, it could be the other. I'm not saying it's one or the other, but the difficulty about those kind of experiences is just hard to know.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So what's the next one?
The next one is, what is your view on other worlds?
Who asked that question? Other worlds. So which other worlds?
Such as other realities, such as spiritual worlds, spirit guides, where they come from.
Well, spirit guides, I've never met any particular spirit guides that didn't have bodies. So I have met spirit guides that have had bodies in the form of teachers or mentors or extraordinary human beings, but I've never met a spirit guide without a body.
Okay.
So I can't comment on that.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's pretty much it. Well,
What?
and I just kind of wondered about the revolutionary process that you talk about, the
Evolutionary.
enlightenment.
Yeah.
So you don't see that entails also being able to be clairvoyant, being able to see and hear from other worlds, which actually borders on what my neighbor was talking about too, talking about, well, how do we know if we are mentally all there, or if it's maybe bordering on the psychopath or schizophrenic. When you read about some of the African cultures, some of them, they talk about tree spirits and nature spirits, and they say they do not have schizophrenics in their tribe, because as soon as a child starts having any kind of experiences, they take him to the shaman. And the shaman then teaches them how to listen, how to see, what they are seeing, what they are hearing. And they do not have schizophrenics because they know what the nature is and what it is they see and they hear. In our culture, in the Western culture, we do not have such teachings. If we do hear something, if we do see something, people see auras, people are hearing things, then they're taken to the mental hospital, they're giving some pills, so hopefully they'll not see or hear anything anymore. We're not teaching them how to use their gifts, so to speak. And I just kind of wondered, do you see this as part of the evolutionary process that you teach?
Taking people who see things that other people don't see to the hospital? No, I don't think it's a good idea.
No, being able to interpret those kind of things that are happening. Because I see that as, there are people that are having the ability.
Anyway, the thing is, it's a very general question you're asking. Some people are crazy and see all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife's mother in India, she told me that her mother was feeding a picture of Guru Nanak. Her parents come from a Sikh. They're Sikhs, so Guru Nanak is the father of the Sikhs. So her mother was feeding the picture. Her mother's like in her 80s and she's losing her mind. And she talks to her husband and all kinds of other people that she is sure is there, but actually she's losing her mind. So the thing is, I can't possibly comment on what you're saying. I have no idea. Some people are clairvoyants and they really are able to see into the future and see things that haven't happened yet, and able to see dimensions of reality that are, for most of us, are unavailable. And other people are crazy and are just having paranoid fantasies and projecting. And I would hesitate to make a distinction here because I have no idea.
Okay.
I just
so
know
you
that
don't
there's-
see it as being part of the evolutionary process that you're talking
Not
about?
necessarily, no.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
That was really my question. Okay.
Not necessarily, no. Okay, what was the next one?
There was a sense of belonging in the world.
Very good. Who is that? Hello? Sense of belonging in the world. Well, when you were asking your question about belonging, you see, the sense of belonging, this relates to the question you asked. The sense of belonging relates to who you think you are. So, belonging relates to identity. So if at the lowest level of development is like you asked about the stages, so the lowest level for human beings is egocentric, which is the consciousness of a baby. So a baby's belonging relates to being connected to the mother, right? So belonging for a baby is related to biological impulses, the mother's breast, the mother's smell, the connection to the mother. So belonging relates to the mother. If you're at egocentric level, which is this first level, ethnocentric level, belonging would relate to kind of some tribal sense of identity. And if you're part of a tribe, your identity is related to your blood type, your blood group. Everybody in your tribe is your family. And people who are not part of your tribe are not part of your family. So your sense of belonging relates to being with your tribe. If you're not with your tribe, you feel separate from where you belong, and you belong with your tribe. The next level would be mythocentric. So if you're based, mythocentric represents the emergence of the world's great religious traditions. So with mythocentric, you belong if you're with other people that share the same creation story that you believe in. So if you believe in the story of Jesus, then your sense of belonging is going to be when you're with other Christians, you're going to feel a sense of belonging. Because all these other individuals believe in the same creation myth or creation story. So your sense of belonging will be related to them, because they believe in the same creation myth or creation story as you do, and your sense of security and your sense of being connected will be other people who have the same beliefs. You follow? Egocentric, ethnocentric, mythocentric, nation-centric. If you have a strong national identity, I'm Danish, I'm American, then if you're American, you feel very comfortable with other Americans because they're the best people, obviously. Not like Europeans who are weird. And in America, you feel that's where I belong. In my country, with my people, with my customs, with my food, with my family and my friends and my house and my neighborhood, okay? So if your identity is, if your sense of identity is related to your nation, your sense of belonging will relate to your nation. If the next level beyond that's world-centric, universally human, world-centric, universal human. So world-centric, universal human means I feel comfortable. My sense of belonging is to planet Earth. I belong on planet Earth because I'm a human being first and foremost, and I feel one with all human beings, right? I feel comfortable on the Earth because it's the planet that's given rise to my species. So egocentric, ethnocentric, mythocentric, nation-centric, world-centric. My sense of belonging is to the earth itself and to all humanity. My sense of belonging relates to all of humanity. I feel comfortable as a human being on planet Earth, and I relate to all of humanity. So there's a level beyond world-centric is the leading edge in the world today. World-centric is the very leading edge, and obviously Denmark is at the leading edge of the leading edge. So the world-centric universal human, you all in Denmark are already there. You're already at that highest level of human cultural development, which is world-centric universal human. You all see yourself as being human beings, first and foremost, before you see yourself as being Danes, before you see yourself as being Christians, before you see yourself as being a member of a particular ethnic group or minority, before you see yourself as being a member of a particular family, you see yourself as being human beings, don't you? Don't you? But there's a level beyond world-centric, which is cosmocentric. So cosmocentric means now you relate to the evolutionary process. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe, awakening to itself in the form of the body, mind, personality of myself. I am evolution itself, awakening to itself through the body, mind, personality of myself. I am the entire creative process, awakening to itself through the body, mind, personality of myself. I am the creative process. Now, some people call the creative process spirit. The energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe is spirit in action. Eros, or the evolutionary impulse, the creative force in the universe, we could choose to call spirit, or God, if you want to use that word, God or spirit, what caused the universe to exist. Why does something exist versus nothing? There was an impulse to exist. What caused the universe to exist? There's a drive, there's an energy, there's an impulse, there's an energy and intelligence that's compelling the universe to exist. It's driving the universe to exist. It's compelling us to ask these questions, to want to know the answers. It's all the same energy. So our sense of belonging relates to our level of development. So if you're a baby, it's going to be your mother. If you're ethnocentric or tribal, it'll be with your blood group. If you identify yourself with one of the great traditional religious movements, then it'll be related to whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Buddhist. If you're a very strong sense of national identity, that'll be it. And finally, if you're a world-centric universal human, like all of us, you'll say, I'm a human being and I feel at home on the earth, fundamentally. And higher than that is, you'll see yourself as a human being in relationship to the creative process as a whole. You relate to your own humanity and individuality. You'll see your own humanity and your own individuality in relationship to the creative process as a whole. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe. I am the evolutionary impulse, awakening to itself through the body, mind, personality of myself. I'm evolution incarnate. I'm the incarnation of evolution itself. 14 billion years of evolution has led to this moment, and this body, and this mind, and this form, and this personality. Right? I'm part of an evolutionary process. I'm part of a creative process that's going somewhere. The creative process is a moving train. It's going somewhere new. The creative process is moving towards the future. The creative process is becoming conscious through us. The creative process is gaining the capacity for consciousness, self-reflective awareness, complex cognition through higher order human development. Because we're here, the energy and intelligence that created the universe is gaining all kinds of powers and capacities that it did not have before we were here. Before human beings existed in the universe, as far as we know, there was no way for the energy and intelligence that created the universe to see itself, to know itself, to feel itself, to conceive of itself, to imagine itself, even to contemplate itself, to think about itself, to bear witness to itself. At night, when you look up in the sky and see the stars and the galaxies, you are the creator, the energy and intelligence that created the universe, bearing witness to what you have created in the form of the body, mind, personality of yourself. When you look up, it's not only you, it's the energy and intelligence that created the universe, bearing witness to itself. This body, mind, personality is merely a vehicle through which the creator, or the energy and intelligence that created the universe, bears witness to itself and consciously begins to engage with what it created. Do you follow?
Yeah.
So when you embrace an evolutionary worldview and an evolutionary orientation, you see everything in terms of a process. It's a cosmic process, a biological process, and a cultural process. Cosmic evolution, biological evolution, and cultural evolution is one process, not three. They're all part of one unfolding. The energy and intelligence that created the universe gave rise to cosmic evolution, which gave rise to biological evolution, which gave rise to cultural evolution, which is mind. And that's one unfolding. One gave rise to the other, which gave rise to the other, which gave rise to the other. And we, because of our complex consciousness, and capacity for higher order cognition and thinking have the means to know all this. And when you discover this, when you know this, the universe is knowing it through you. Then that to me is endlessly interesting. When you know it, the universe, the energy and intelligence that created the universe, is realizing and recognizing itself through you. So then your experience of consciousness and cognition and introspection and revelation and insight and knowledge is not happening in isolation. The universe is awakening to itself through you. That is incredibly interesting and significant. Thank you. Who's the next one?
The next one is, why does the universe exist?
Why does the universe exist? Okay. Now, I don't know for sure. But I have a sense of it. So my understanding of why the universe existed comes from metaphysical fantasizing. You understand metaphysical fantasizing? So I was trying to imagine, and this is similar to what other mystics have come up with. So my concept is very similar to others who've thought about this. So I would, to understand why the universe exists, you have to imagine what it would be like to be God before the universe existed. So before there was time and space, before the material universe existed, there was nothing. There was no time, there was no space, there was no matter, there was no energy, there was only primordial emptiness, there was only nothingness. Nothing existed. But you, when I say you, it means all of us, we were all there as absolute subjectivity, pure subjectivity. If you go into a very deep state of meditation, right? If you go into a very deep state of meditation, you can experience this absolute or pure subjectivity before time and space. And the way it works is, meditation is the removal of the identification of the mind with objects. Everybody follow that? Meditation is the removal of the identification of the mind with objects. So the way it works is, if you enter into a meditative state, you stop identifying with thought. Right? So if you stop identifying with thought, thought goes from the foreground into the background. If you stop identifying with thought, thought goes from the foreground into the background. So when thought fades from the foreground into the background, your awareness of time and the passing of time fades from the foreground into the background. So when the mind disappears, time disappears, which is very interesting. When the mind disappears, time disappears. When the mind fades away, time fades away, because time and mind arise along the same plane. So when you enter into a state of meditation, thought moves from the foreground into the background, and your awareness of time and the passing of time moves from the foreground into the background. When the mind fades away and time fades away, your sense of any kind of emotional connection to the world also fades away. So when the mind disappears, time disappears. When time disappears, the world disappears. When the world disappears, or your emotional connection with the world disappears, your sense of subjectivity, the sense of I, gets bigger. But the sense of I now is not related to thought. It's not related to memory. It's not related to history, which is time. And it's not related to the world. So it's a deeper experience of I. I unrelated to thought, memory. I unrelated to time and history. I unrelated to the world. Okay? And then, so when the mind disappears and time disappears and the world disappears and everything disappears. There's only absolute subjectivity, pure subjectivity, unrelated to thought and memory and time and world, okay? But it's subjectivity that's infinite, beginningless and endless and timeless and formless, beginningless and endless and timeless and formless subjectivity. It's called I am. Okay? So in this beginningless and endless, timeless and formless subjectivity without beginning and no end, there's only freedom and unconditional, absolute, unimaginable freedom. Because before the universe existed, before there was time and space, did you have any problems? Was there any sense of limitation? Could anything possibly be wrong? Before the universe was created, could anything possibly be wrong? It's a question. No. So nothing existed yet, except beginningless and endless, timeless and formless, infinite freedom and being without end. Okay? So then the answer to your question of why the universe existed, if you imagine, if timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless being without end is the nature of the unmanifest. It's called the unmanifest, the uncreated, the unborn. If that's the nature of reality, if that's the nature of reality before the universe existed, and reality before the universe existed had subjectivity without mind, subjectivity without mind, subjectivity that was timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless, infinite without mind, that experience is ecstatic and infinitely peaceful, free. So the question is, if you were God and you were abiding for countless billions of eons of no time in beginningless and endless freedom for eternity, which would mean you'd be doing nothing forever. Right? So you have to this is a metaphysical fantasy, I said. This is imagination. We're using imagination to come to an answer of why the universe existed. So if you were doing nothing forever, if you were doing nothing for eternity, if you were God and you were doing nothing for eternity, you might become curious about what it would be like to do something. And the reason why you'd become curious about what it would be like to do something is because you've been doing nothing forever. So it makes sense to me that if you've been doing nothing forever, the thought might arise in your no mind, what would it be like to do something? Since I've been doing nothing forever and it's totally fine, but I'm curious what it would be like to do something. Now because you're God, you're infinite, immortal, fearless and doubtless. Infinite, immortal, fearless and doubtless. Right? So you're not afraid of anything. God doesn't experience fear or doubt. So in that state of God consciousness, there wouldn't be any fear or doubt. But you might think, well, maybe I should do something. I'm curious what it would be like to do something. I'm very curious. And this might go on for long periods of no time, because no time exists yet. There's no other way to say it unless I say that. This dialogue with yourself. And then each time you think about maybe I should do something, that would build up a certain kind of creative tension would build up. And each time that thought would arise in your no mind, it would add to the creative tension. And the tension would eventually build up as a creative aspiration that was unmanifest. It'd be right on the surface of emptiness, right? Right on the very surface of emptiness. They would build up over long periods of no time this evolutionary tension, creative tension, until it built up to such a fever pitch that you would let go. As God, you let go, and that would be the beginning of the creative process. So I think God was curious to see what it would be like to manifest his or her, himself or herself in form. What would it be like? I know what it's like to be formless and timeless. I don't know what it's like to take form, and I want to know. I want to give it a try. That's my answer. Thank you. Curiosity. Right? But it's not an ordinary curiosity. It would be a godlike curiosity. You follow? Godlike curiosity. So we can't just think of this in relationship to merely human or mortal capacities for curiosity. We have to think of it as kind of a godlike, unimaginable curiosity. What was the next one?
The next one was about fear of letting go.
Yes, and it's I think the answer you just gave there about letting go into the timeless and formless and beginningless and endless. You know, having I have being in that spot, being just the wind in everything. I can be afraid of what happens. I have to pick up my son at the train station. You know, being there in that total emptiness, voidness, and being softness there. Sometimes I have to put on my alarm clock, you know, on my telephone, because I can't be totally sure that in being in that space, I will remember to pick up my son at the train station.
That's scary.
That's quite scary. Yeah, it is quite scary. So, and I have seen people being in that catatonic state.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. I have to pick up my son. I have to make dinner. And being in that beginningless, timeless, formless, endless space, it doesn't really matter, because everything takes care of itself. But how do I actually know that it's not being there? I know it, but there is a little voice at some point telling me, well, you could end up catatonic. And then he stands there on the train station not getting picked up.
I don't think that's a good idea.
No. So that is how to know to when to.
Well, because in the teaching of evolutionary enlightenment, God or the absolute has two dimensions to it. Reality, the sum total of reality is everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist, right? If we'd say the sum total of all of reality is the sum total of everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist, right? If you say everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist, is anything missing? Okay, so then we divide the sum total of reality into being and becoming. So we'd say half of reality is timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless being, which we were just talking about. Before the universe was created, there's only timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless being. Right? And if you enter a deep meditative state, then you find access to that timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless being. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. But then, the Absolute chose to become time and space, energy and matter, life and mind. So when timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless emptiness and being chose to take form and become energy and matter, life and mind, there was a shift. And that shift was desirelessness, timeless, formless being without end. There's no desire, there's just freedom. Being is freedom because there's no desire in being. In being, there's only being. There's no desire for anything. Right? That's why meditation is such a relief, because your fears and your desires are absent. They go away. Right? In meditation, your fears and desires are gone, and you are full with the experience of being. But when there was this shift from being to becoming, emptiness changed form, it became an intense or absolute desire to exist. The universe is an absolute desire to exist. The universe is an absolute desire to exist. The evolutionary impulse, the energy and intelligence that created the universe and creates the universe, is the absolute desire to exist. So when you awaken to the evolutionary impulse yourself, you'll experience an absolute desire to exist. You want to be here. I want to exist. I want to be here. I want to be here in the world, in this body, in this mind. I want to be here in the world, being the person that I am, so I can create the future. I want to be here. When you awaken to God or Spirit as the desire to exist, as the evolutionary impulse, as the creative motive in the universe, you experience that as an absolute desire to exist. And why it's so important today, at the leading edge of culture, is because it destroys ambivalence about existence. Many conscious, intelligent people who are very lucky and sophisticated are very ambivalent, which means divided about being in the world. I'm divided about being in the world. I'm divided about, I'm not sure whether I want to be here. Do I really want to be here? I don't know. I'm not so sure that living is a good thing. When you awaken to the evolutionary impulse, you have no doubt that living is a good thing, that being in the world is a good thing. I want to exist. So, when you embrace evolutionary spirituality, you won't be worried about not picking up your son.
Because then the impulse that comes, that arises, I'd better pick up my son because I want to do that. That is a part of being in the evolutionary process of being creative, because I know he is a part of the universe that needs me to be alive.
No, but the thing is that the evolutionary impulse makes you want to be responsible, because you care about what's happening and you care about the future.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Next one is, what can I do to become the evolutionary impulse?
Hey, how can it become the primary thing in my life to be the authentic self?
Well, if you wanted to be an Olympic champion in swimming, if you wanted to be an Olympic champion in swimming, would you have any chance of winning a gold medal if the desire to become an Olympic champion was not more important to you than anything else?
Well, I know that the path and the goal is the same.
Okay, we could, but just stay with me. Yeah. If you wanted to become an Olympic champion in swimming, would you have any chance of winning if the desire to become an Olympic champion in swimming was not the most important thing in your life? That's a yes or no question.
Yes.
What?
Well,
I'll ask you one more time.
Yeah. Now I said yes, and now it's no.
No, listen. If you wanted to become an Olympic champion and get a gold medal in swimming, would you have any chance in winning if getting a gold medal was not the most important thing in your life?
No.
Thank you. That's very good. So the same thing for this. If you want to become an enlightened person, that has to be the most important thing in your life.
Okay, but why? If I want to feel this ecstasy about it and for sure I'm enlightened, what can I do? How can I become it?
I'm saying the answer to your question is you have to want to become enlightened more than you want anything else.
And that is the answer.
But that's the first step.
What is the next?
Well, I don't want to tell you what to do. This is Denmark. You're a free man. You can do whatever you want. But what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is actually important. The intention is the foundation of freedom. Yeah. So a lot of people say, I want to have an experience. I say, but the first thing is, how much do you want to change? How much do you want to be free? How much do you want to evolve? How much do you want to become more conscious? How much do you want to become liberated? On a scale from 1 to 10, is it 2 out of 10?
100.
No, I said on a scale from 1 to 10.
10, of course.
Okay, so then that's the foundation. So once you get to the point where you want that, where you're so focused on the thing itself, then you get on your way.
Okay.
You follow?
I follow you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so the next one is that the spiritual evolution, the stages of development.
What?
The stages of development.
I think that
I answered you. Egocentric, ethnocentric, mythocentric, world-centric, cosmocentric.
we're talking about the shift from the being to the becoming. So what's next? What's the next shift?
Is that not enough?
What?
Well, the highest in the way I teach, the highest level is cosmocentric.
Okay.
The highest level is getting to the point when you go egocentric, ethnocentric, mythocentric, nation-centric, world-centric, cosmocentric, which is where you've experienced a fundamental shift of identification from your egoic self, your culturally conditioned sense of identity as fundamentally being who we are. Ego plus culture equals I, right? The self, the culture creates the self. You all know that? If you take a human being and keep them outside of culture from when they're born, they won't become human. They remain animals. So culture is fundamental in creating, giving rise to the structures, the self structures. Culture gives rise to the self. Everybody follow that? So ego plus culture equals self. So the highest level that I know of is when there's a shift from ego plus culture as self to I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe, awakening to itself in the form of the body, mind, personality of myself. So then you see the ego and you see the culturally conditioned self structures as products of an evolutionary process, right? The ego and the culturally created self structures are products of an evolutionary process, right? So then you see everything from the perspective of evolution, including your own self. I see my body, my mind, my personality, my ego, my culturally conditioned self structures as products of an evolutionary drive. And then so your sense of self just shifts. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe. That's your sense of identity is shifted. I am the evolutionary impulse. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe. I'm not merely a human being because the world-centric, which is the highest level in the world today, which is the step below cosmocentric, is awakening to the universal nature of being human. I'm first and foremost a human being. But you're already there. I am the evolutionary process. I'm the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe in the form of the body, mind, personality of myself. That's a whole other thing. It's a shift of identity. Thank you.
The next is
We're making good progress, are we not? I'm very surprised myself.
so the next one is about the book, about explaining what you mean about the one.
Was my question yet?
Yeah.
It was just difficult. I think you have been talking a lot about it here, about the cosmic consciousness, but you're talking about the one, where you have always good and bad, up and down, and But you
Can
find
you speak a little louder?
But you have a place where you are talking about that's only one thing you have found yourself in the.
Okay, very
in
good.
your
The
consciousness.
one is, before the universe was created, there was only one and not two, right? Huh? Before the universe was created, there was only one and not two, right?
Right.
Is that clear? Very good. And when the universe was created, the one became the many. Right? So when the universe was created, the one became the many. But when the one became the many forgot that they were the one. Isn't that right? They forgot. They thought, I'm a separate tree. I'm a separate flower. I'm a separate bumblebee. I'm a separate snake. I'm a separate elephant. I'm a separate whale. I'm a separate human being. I exist independently. And then, about 3,000 years ago, human beings discovered this depth dimension. 3,000 years ago or so, during the axial age, human beings discovered this depth dimension, this primordial dimension that exists beyond the mind. And that's what the Buddha discovered when he sat under the Bodhi tree, this depth dimension that exists beyond the mind. But before this, around 3,000 years ago, something like that, I'm speaking generally, before the axial age, this depth dimension was unknown. Human beings hadn't discovered it yet. So it was in the axial age that human beings discovered this depth dimension that exists beyond the mind. And they realized beyond the mind there's only one. Right? And so that was when the many discovered that they'd been the one all along, but they hadn't known it. I've actually been the one all along, but I didn't know it. When there's no time and no space, when there's no mind, no time and no space, there's only one. And I am and you are and we all are that one without a second that exists before time and before form. So that was about 3,000 years ago, human beings discovered that one. And then, about 200 years ago, human beings discovered evolution. Because before 200 years ago, human beings didn't understand that the universe was part of a cosmic process that had a beginning in time. Billions of years ago, the universe was seen as a static process. And culture was largely seen, even though historians knew better, but generally culture was seen as being fairly static. People didn't know that biological life evolved from lower, simple levels of complexity to greater and greater levels of complexity until Darwin made his great discovery that biological life is part of a developmental process, from simple forms of life to more complex forms of life to more complex forms of life. So 200 years ago we discovered evolution, biological evolution. And then Hegel, the German philosopher Hegel, taught us about cultural evolution. And in the 20th century, we've learned about cosmic evolution. We only discovered the Big Bang in the 20th century. I think it was the second half of the 20th century. I don't exactly remember when. Very recently, we've discovered that the cosmos is evolving as part of a cosmic process. And then, in the early 20th century, there were great evolutionary philosophers like Henri Bergson and Teilhard de Chardin that discovered the interior of evolution, the inside of evolution, which has to do with the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of mind. And Sri Aurobindo in India discovered the interior dimension of evolution, which relates to the evolution of consciousness. And then there was when mystics began to understand the notion of this developmental process called evolution, they understood that the one that existed before the universe was created is the same one that exists as the creative process, that they're not separate. The one that existed as timeless, formless emptiness is the same one that exists as the manifest process of a state of evolution. And I've picked up on all of that. I've absorbed all of that in my own philosophy, in my own teaching. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next one is what I understood about the old enlightenment versus the becoming, and whether you have to go through all your shadows to become enlightened.
Not necessarily. Because people can become enlightened without knowing about their shadows, and they can become enlightened through learning about their shadows.
What I think about is
because, for example, there have been very, very powerfully enlightened people with big shadows.
Yeah.
And also the light of enlightenment itself can cast its own shadow.
Mm.
So it's challenging stuff. So I think it's both. Both are true.
Okay. But do you see that I feel that you make a constructionism, if you could call it that, when you talk about becoming, because you talk about creating your future. So when you talk about becoming and you talk about to create, I feel an urge to build and to create and to put things together in my life, and that by that way, if I do it creatively enough, I can reach what you say is the enlightenment, that it's the same source in a way, the enlightenment in the pre-modern enlightenment and in the becoming part. But I feel that you have to construct creatively to reach what you call becoming. Is that correct?
I don't follow. Can you ask it again?
No. What do we have to work with? I mean, if I'm not going to just sit down and stare out of the window, I must be able to feel an active, participating, implicating power where I am still in contact with the spirit. That's what I get out of your evolutionary work.
Very good.
And that inspires me very much. But the thing is that I found out was I could not get that level of energy before I moved a lot of old shit. Sorry.
Okay. So it's an American word, shit.
Thanks.
So what were you saying?
The thing is, the becoming part,
yes,
isn't that necessarily, if you really want to live as an enlightened person in the Western society? I mean, I see your vision is very, very smart when you are a Western European.
It's a Western model.
Okay.
Evolution is a really Western concept.
Okay.
One of my students, who's Indian, who lived in America for 20 years, and he just went back to live in India. And I was with him in India a few months ago. And you know, when I was in India a lot the last 2 years speaking about evolutionary enlightenment. But the thing is, in India, even though of course there's actual history of India, there's a real history, of course. There's a cultural history. For Indians, the mythological world of the Ramayana, mythological stories, play a larger role in the Indian psyche than does the actual history. So for a lot of Indians, for, you know, traditional ones and modern ones, Indian history is ahistorical because it's really based on mythical thinking, magical thinking. It's like before the Western Enlightenment in Europe, history was really biblical. It was the Jesus story was what all of history was about. And it was only with the Western Enlightenment that the mythical or magical thinking, where you see life through the lens of this big biblical fairy tale, was transcended. So in the same way, in the East, in India, their notion of time, of history, is really ahistorical. Now in the West, our relationship to time and history is very much related to time and history. And that's why I feel that we need a mysticism, a spiritual teaching and a mysticism that is very related to time and history. If it's going to be, and has to be related, it has to be related to time and history, and has to be rational in order to be culturally acceptable. And that's what I'm trying to do, to come up with a mystical teaching, a spiritual teaching that is very much related to time and history and cultural evolution, that is fiercely rational.
I think it's working brilliantly, because I tried what you mentioned when you talk about being and the pre-modern enlightenment. I tried that 20 years ago, and it was not accepted in my own culture.
That's right.
But today, just to say how much your work in a practical sense has meant in my life, I now experience what you call the higher we. I experience that when I take care of cancer patients who are going to die soon. And we very often, very spontaneously, have a conversation where, I just walk around and check their measurements, and I give them food and whatever. But very often when I just sit down for a moment, they start talking about their life to me, and we experience what I understand as what you call the higher we. And I feel that they experience that too. And that way I feel that now your kind of work has made it possible for me to feel a connection with the enlightenment and still be functioning in a very rational way. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What was the next one?
The next one is about ego transcendence, the mechanics of it.
Who is that?
I've been training Buddhism for quite some years.
How many?
Let's say 4 years.
Okay. Which kind of Buddhism?
The what they call Diamond Way.
Huh?
Diamond Way, Kamikaze.
Sorry?
Diamond Way.
Is it Tibetan?
Yeah. And now I've been reading your book a few times, audio book. So it's this thing about ego transcendence that I just wanted to understand a little bit better, how it works.
Which part?
Well, the whole thing.
Well, the thing is, the ego transcendence is it's a shift of identity. So, the way it works is this. If you say, let's say the sum total of the personality is 100%. We just said the sum total of the personality is 100%. Now, I said before there are two truths. There's relative truth and absolute truth. Right? There's relative truth and absolute truth. Enlightened awareness comes from recognizing and be awake to the non-relative or absolute dimension of reality. Okay? So, you can be interested in enlightenment with maybe you have a conversation with a friend who's attending a Buddhist school. And they say, you know, I've heard about this thing called enlightenment. There was someone called the Buddha 2,500 years ago who discovered this depth dimension. And in this depth dimension, it's possible to know an infinite, beginningless and endless, immortal truth. And if you know that truth, according to what they say, it changes everything. You say, that's very interesting. I'd like to know. So that person goes from 0 to 2%. Now they're interested in the absolute. Right? Are they enlightened yet? No. But they're interested. They've gone from 0 to 2%. So then they go, then you lend them one of your books. They spend the whole weekend at home reading the book, and they get so excited that they go from 2% to 5% because they're really excited. Right? Then your teacher is coming 3 months later to Denmark to give a 10-day meditation retreat. So then they decide, I have to go to this meditation retreat because I'm so excited about what I read in the book. So they go on their meditation retreat, they learn how to meditate, they have a very deep experience of this depth dimension. They actually have an experience of it. So they go from 5% to 15%. Now they're really excited. Your friend's wife is getting nervous because all your friend's talking about is Buddhism and meditation and enlightenment, and he's losing interest in his hobbies, sex, and other things he used to be really interested in. That was just an arbitrary thought. Don't worry about it. Your friend basically comes up to your level because you are 15%. But he actually gets so turned on that he follows your teacher back to India. He went to his boss at work and he said, look, I need 3 months off because I have to go with my teacher to India. The boss tells him, I'm giving it because I trust you, but if you don't come back in 3 months, you're fired. So he goes to India, and once this guy gets to India, he's so excited being with his teacher in the teacher's monastery in the Himalayas. He calls his wife, said, sweetheart, I love you, but I can't come back. I think I have to give my life to becoming enlightened. She says, but you can't leave me. We have our life together. We have our child. We have all our responsibilities. He said, you're completely right, but I have to give this everything I got. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And then he stays at this monastery, and he goes into seclusion under the guidance of his teacher, and he goes through the various stages of letting go until he goes from 15 to 20 to 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. And then the point is when you go 45, 46, 47, 48, 49%, the question is, who's in dominion or who's in control of the vehicle? The vehicle is the body, mind, and personality. So if the vehicle is under the dominion of the fears and desires of the psychological self, which is the ego, and if the vehicle, which is the body, mind, and personality, is under the dominion of the culturally conditioned values of an unenlightened culture, even though in Denmark the culture is relatively speaking, very enlightened, right? More enlightened than any culture on the earth, except there's no depth dimension, right? Follow? So the point is to me, the way I explain it is when you go from 49 to 50 to 51, when you cross the 51% threshold, when the depth dimension, when knowledge of and stability in the depth dimension goes from 49 to 50 to 51%, you're on the other side. So when you cross from 50 to 51, now you're an enlightened person. Because you're more identified with the depth dimension, the absolute, than you are with the relative. You're more identified with the absolute than you are with the relative. Now there's still 49% of you that's identified with the relative, but it's 51% that's identified with the absolute. So now you have access to this other side. And when you get up to you have to make a lot of effort to get from 15 to 20 to 25 to 30, 40, you have to make a lot of effort, 40, 45, 46, 47, 48, 50. When you cross over to 51%, now the absolute has a momentum. And the momentum of the absolute begins to carry you. The momentum of the absolute begins to carry you. So it's not just your ego, your psychological self, and your cultural background at work. There's another dimension that's carrying you, which is the absolute itself. And then once you get to 51%, then you want to go 51, 52, 55, 56. You want to try and get it up to 60 or 70%. So in fact, after your friend became enlightened, he thanked his teacher, and then he went back home. He went back to his wife, because he realized he had to do what he had to do to become enlightened, but he also loved his wife, and he loved his child. So he went back, and then he came back to Denmark, and then he became a teacher. I made that up. But it's a good story.
Thank you.
To make a point. You follow? Does that make sense? So it's a shift of identification from the relative, psychological self, culturally conditioned identity, to the absolute, which is the mysterious, infinite, metaphysical dimension. So when there's the shift of identity from the relative to the absolute, that's what enlightenment is. And we want to get to the 51% point. That's the goal. And then once you get to 51, then we want to increase 52, 53, 54. All right?
Thank you.
So, there's good news. We have to take a break. So, we'll meditate for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Then we'll take a break and we'll come back. Oh my goodness. We only go till 10, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask you guys. I can keep going if you want. If you want to take a break, we can have a quick break. Otherwise, we can keep going. It's completely up to you. Okay, very good. So let's wait. We'll meditate for a minute. We'll take a 10-minute break and then come back.